Lable Braun is an author, thought leader, who helps his readers and friends navigate the terrain that exists between mysticism and science. He is a true philosopher who's filled with love for family and humanity. Lable, it's a pleasure having you on the show. We get so much good feedback from our conversations, from my interviews with you. I can't wait to see what we delve in today. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure is all mine, Phyllis.
Well, tell me what's on your mind, because that's a question that I only ask a few people. But in your case, it's a genuine desire for me to have information about what's on your mind.
What's been most on my mind recently is the concept of peace. Two reasons for that. One is I think it is the central issue of our time. We seem to be divided and at war with each other, ourselves, our principles. There just does not seem to be peace found between us and other humans, between us and the environment. And I think that's a central question we have to answer nowadays. Second is that recently I was diagnosed with kidney cancer. And the most amazing discovery to me was that I was at peace with it. And as you probably know from personal experience, I have not always been a person at peace. As a matter of fact, it's probably been a little bit more to the other end. And that was okay for then, because that caused the kind of agitation that caused me to explore and learn and grow. But peace was not a hallmark of my character. And yet I was truly, truly at peace with this. So I did a little archaeological dig into my own soul to kind of find out, how did this happen? How did I become a person of peace? And what I discovered really, really intrigued me, and thought there might be nuggets there for others to use in their own journey to peace as well. So that's what's on my mind.
Well, it's interesting that you use that term archaeological dig of your soul. What was
Mhm.
the process that you used to examine your thoughts?
A process really of comparison of what is it I see in my belief system now that was not there before? Where have I grown? I didn't grow intending to find inner peace. I grew to grow, and yet somehow it ended up finding inner peace. So it was, how am I a different person now than I was when I was not feeling at peace?
Well, let's examine the story, because there are many
Sure.
people who are experiencing cancer. There are many
Hmm.
who have relatives or friends who have suffered cancer.
Hmm.
So it is not a peaceful journey. What is your situation now? Are you well? And take us through the discovery of the diagnosis and how your reaction was discovered.
The discovery of the diagnosis was actually providential. There seemed to be a guiding hand in it, in that, as you know, I used to live in North Carolina, and my test there always showed a little bit of chronic kidney disease, but not enough numbers to really be of concern. And that wasn't any fault on the part of the medical people there. I've heard here that that would be the normal response to where my numbers were. But I moved up to New Hampshire and have a wonderful new personal care primary care physician. And he looked at those numbers and he said those numbers were a little off. And I said, "Oh, don't worry about them. I have the history here. They're not very different than they were before." So, and I was always told that not to worry about them. He said, "Not me," referring to himself. "When I see those numbers, I do a I think the equivalent of a sonogram. And so they investigated my innards with sound, and they found a tumor growing there. And that was how I found it. And it was, again, providential. Had I not moved up here, I would not have found it until it was too late. As it was, when they finally did examine the kidney after they had taken it out, they found it was very, very, very close to the renal vein. And had it gotten to the renal vein, that would have given it a superhighway to my heart and all the other organs in my body. So some hand guided me, get thee to New Hampshire and find the tumor. So that's how I found it.
Okay, well, I don't mean to do a gender thing here, but you're being a very um, analytical storyteller
Sure.
about your situation. Were you frightened or shocked when you heard that you had cancer?
That's the amazing thing. No, I wasn't. That is where I start to say, why am I at peace with this?
Mm.
My background was in very active work, and I usually would have been, okay, what are the 14 things that I need to do by Tuesday on this? And let me see how I can get this done. I would have been up at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, worrying about things I could do nothing about at 3 or 4 in the morning, and yet I wasn't. And how did this come about? You've put your finger on the real conundrum for me.
Well, you spoke to me in an email about the pillars of peace.
Mhm.
So before we get to that, I'm sure that people listening or watching would like to know how you are now before we get to that.
Um, Peace seems to have a very good influence on the body. My doctors are all amazed at the progress I've made so quickly. I did have my right kidney removed. I'm in technically in recovery for that, but I feel fine. And the operation went, and these are the world's best surgeons who I was fortunate enough to have work on me. They said it went amazingly smoothly. And my nephrologist, that's my kidney doctor, told my wife that she's going to have to put up with me for a long, long time. So I think peace has a really good prophylactic influence on the body.
So, pillars of peace.
Yes.
What did you mean by that in the email to me?
So what I meant is there are certain foundations to achieving peace. My peace is not going to be the same as anybody else's peace. I once read a bumper sticker, was one of my favorite ones, that said, "You are totally unique, just like everyone else." So, and we're all unique and have a unique experience, but we have one thing in common. We live in the same universe, and we are subject to the same universal laws. And that's where my archaeological dig led me to, that I've spent the last 10 years really focused on universal laws and how they apply to life. Um, Many people think that's too esoteric. What do I care what a quantum particle does? Well, you're made up of quantum particles. It does affect how you are. So I was looking for what the universal characteristics are that could serve as a foundation for people to build their own journey to peace. And these characteristics are important because it occurs to me, and I hope others will agree with me, but it's okay if they don't, but it occurs to me, we can never truly be at peace until we are aligned with the characteristics of the universe we live in. If you are not aligned with those characteristics, you might be at peace in some other universe, but not in this one. because that's what pervades the universe, pervades our bodies, our brains, our lives, and we have to be aligned with them.
Well, it would be easy to be aligned with something you understand. How can you be aligned with what is fundamentally a mystery for most people?
Thanks to progress in science, philosophy, spirituality, these aren't truly mysteries
Hmm.
anymore. And I've boiled them down to 4 characteristics that I think are really accessible and understandable to anybody. I call this the cues, and by cues I mean CUES. And I absolutely hate acronyms, Phyllis. I hate them because I find too often people come up with the acronym first and then try to bend the theory to fit the acronym. But in this case, I was on a walk with my wonderful wife, and we were discussing some of these concepts. And I named the 4 things that I had come up with, and she said, "Oh, do you realize that spells cues?" I said, "No, I did not realize that." And it's perfect because I think people can use these as cues in their own search. So, not to prolong the mystery, the 4 cues are connection. We live in an exquisitely connected universe. We can get into a little bit deeper into all of these. This is an uncertain universe. We like to believe in control. The human brain loves certainty. It rewards itself with dopamine every time we fool ourselves into believing we're certain about something. And it will give us illusions to make us feel like we're certain about something. We live in an entropic universe. That means things run down, things end. And we live in a subjective universe. I've got to get comfortable with the fact that my reality is not the same as anybody else's reality, but we can be more or less aligned. So these are 4 major characteristics of the universe. And again, by a scientific, spiritual, philosophical, whatever you want to pick, these are 4 major characteristics of the universe. And as modern humans, we are not comfortable with any one of the 4. And that is, I think, the root of the lack of peace in the world.
So let's say the 4 quickly: connection,
Mhm.
uncertainty, the next,
Entropy
entropy,
and subjective.
and subjective. Okay, good. So let's start with connection. Let's say,
Right.
what do you mean by connection? Because there are lots of people alone in their cells, alone in their apartments, um, alone on the train, alone on the highway. What do you mean by connection?
What I mean is that the idea that we are alone and cut off is an illusion. Because the human brain is not comfortable with any 4 of those, and mostly with connection, it creates illusions, such as the illusion of the self, that we can be alone, that there is a self to be alone, rather than a particular expression of the universe, and that it is not connected to anything. At the moment that we're alone, and yes, I understand the concept of aloneness, and yes, I understand what a terrible thing it can be when we fall deeply into that illusion, so much so that there is a movement afoot, which I fully support, to define solitary confinement as a cruel and unusual punishment. We yearn for connection. We yearn for what we know is reality, which is connection, not aloneness, which is illusion. But everybody who's touched you in the past, everybody you've touched in the past, everybody you care about right now, everybody you will come to care about is with you in that cell and in that moment. Every subatomic particle in our universe is breaking Einstein's law of relativity and the limitation of the speed of light by being instantaneously affected and affecting other particles in the universe. The universe is exquisitely connected, so that talking about an individual human being is just a convenient lie. It helps us believe there is an us.
Well, now you're going to go into very deep stuff. I think we're going to have to make sure that this is something we pick up on in future interviews. But
Sure.
let's give it a try, because you're tapping into one of the most controversial concepts in the history of mankind, and that is the fact that we are individuals or we are a part of a collective. And I don't mean the political sense of collective, but that we are all united in some way, because it's not our experience. Label. When I sit in my chair and turn on my TV, I don't think I'm connected to anyone. But you're saying that that is where the illusion is.
Yes.
Okay.
And, it's not a novel thought on my part. Deep thinkers have been telling us this forever, but our brain likes to create an ego, a self that is different and separable from everybody else. What we are finding now, more than any other time, I believe, in our history, is this is dangerous. When we believe that we can look into only our own narrow self-interest and not care about its effect on others, we do very terrible things. And it's based on an illusion. There is no way that anybody in this world, anybody, can be suffering and not have an impact on me or on this illusion of me.
Yeah. We're all breathing the same air. We're all getting the same sunlight. I'm just taking it down from the quantum physics just for a moment. There are some things that we all share constantly.
Yes.
So that's true. We think that we can just do something in one isolated place and that it has no impact. But we've even noticed from the conflict in Ukraine
Yes.
that it's had a tremendous impact on the entire world.
Right.
Shortages of grain in Africa, raising of the cost of living in Europe and in the United States. The war in the Ukraine has affected all of us. So, and I'm sure that famine in Africa or some of the suffering in Siberia affects us. I mean, it's not, I think you're on a key point. I'm just taking it down to grasp at the smaller aspects of it. But continue. So we've established connectedness a bit by what you mean there. Let's
Can I say one more thing about connectedness, though, Phyllis?
Sure, of course.
I think it was the most important element in my being at peace with my cancer, because I have a deep, deep, I would say feeling rather than belief. It's not intellectual, just a deep, deep feeling that all that happens at death is we lose our illusion of separateness. That's what happens. Our subatomic particles are free, not constrained by our brain's need for an ego, to go play with all the other subatomic particles in the universe. That's what happens at death. So death is not fearful to me.
And also your first answer indicates that time itself is an illusion. I mean, many academics have been looking at this question and suggesting that there is no time, that time is a fundamental thing we've invented so that we could function in the universe, and that our eyes see in a certain way, so that we
Yes.
could function. Hmm.
What science tells us is that time is not fundamental. It's not that everything else arises from time and space. Time and space themselves arise from something else. And do you know what that is? Entanglement, connection. Connection creates time and space. And if we talk about it at a much more basic level than that, it becomes evident. What is time except the motion and interaction of lives with each other? What is space except the relativity of one experience to another? Time is not fundamental. Space is not fundamental. Connection is fundamental.
Hmm. Well, that brings us to the next big one, which
Yeah.
really you've created without effort, which is uncertainty. Because
Certainty.
although you're saying these things, I am experiencing a great deal of uncertainty about
Mhm.
those concepts.
And that's good. That's good. You know, uncertainty, the basic nature of the universe is that at its most basic level, we can't predict what is going to happen.
Hmm.
In many cases, in many ways, at its most basic quantum level, we create reality by our experience of it. And that's where I get, well, what does that have to do with my everyday life? Well, we think because we're made up of a lot of subatomic particles, a tremendous number, that at our level, uncertainty disappears. And, you know, if you want, there's an old saying, if you want to hear really deep laughter, tell God your plans. You know, um, things don't go as planned. Um, there is a basic uncertainty to life. And we like to believe, and here's where the illusion comes in again. We like to believe if we can only plan another level, if we can only be a little smarter, if we can only get more people on our side, we can be safe and certain. And that's where you hear the deep laughter come in. We are chasing something that is not possible. What we have to do is get beyond the illusion and accept the uncertainty of life. Um, there's a wonderful concept that the Buddhists hold that pain in life is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And suffering comes from the belief it shouldn't be this way. This could be happening to someone else. It shouldn't be happening to me. It should, I did all the right things. This shouldn't have happened to me. Well, you know what? Sorry, we live in an uncertain universe. And if we want to eliminate suffering, we have to get comfortable with the uncertainty of life.
Well, I think that that's very powerful. I have to push back a little bit
Please.
because one of the great inequities in our world is that some people seem to have more suffering than others.
Mhm.
And if we use your premise from the very beginning that we're all connected, um, there must be something wrong with the fact that there are huge numbers of people in deep suffering
Yes.
and that we haven't been able to pull people out of that situation. And I don't think it's just a matter of accepting the situation. I think that's not what you mean.
No, not at
So,
all.
so we need to clarify that.
So I'd like to make a distinction there. And by this, I don't mean just mere wordplay.
Mhm.
I'd like to, as I said, separate out pain and suffering. And pain is something that we cause each other by what we do. Pain is not equally distributed. Um, pain is definitely something we have to address. How do we reduce the amount of pain we cause? Suffering is how we react to pain, and that is different for everybody. So there are people who have an undue allotment of pain, but aren't suffering as much as many multimillionaire, you know, CEOs that I know of, because it's self-inflicted, and people inflict the suffering on themselves. Now, the fact that pain is not equally distributed is something we should and have to address, because the universe doesn't spread out the pain unequally. We do. Just by mere chance, we should each get an equal amount of pain in our lives, with maybe some rounding error here or there. But we try to set up systems because, again, go back to number one, connected. We have an ego that doesn't want the pain to land on us. Let me figure out a systematic way to make the pain land on somebody else. And that is atrocious. And
Well, there's
also,
also
it's a
the
way
wait,
never to
wait,
be appeased. Yeah, go
wait.
ahead.
I want to go back. I thought you were going to say
Go.
something else. I thought you were
Mhm.
going to say that the neutral concept of connection there is that we do work to make sure the pain doesn't land on us. I don't agree that every human being thinks about how to make the pain land on someone else.
No, 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 no. I say that there are those who create systems to make the
I see.
pain land on somewhere else than themselves, and
Okay.
then those that are most like them. And because we have this illusion of being separate, we tend to link on to people that are most like ourselves and exclude others. Um, there are people who are wonderful to the people in their own town, but terrible to other people. And within their own town, they're wonderful to people who look just like them, who, do the same things they do, and terrible to other people who don't. It's all because we have, going back to the first one, which I do think is the key one, connection, because we have this illusion of a self. And it also causes us not to grow or change. The thing the ego is the most afraid of is death. And it feels that if you change, you will turn into another ego. And that ego you have now will die. If you allow a new belief to sneak its way into your system, if you allow yourself to believe that those others should have the same rights and opportunities that I do, if you allow this, if you allow that, I, as an ego, will die. And that is the one thing that the ego will fight against and keeps us from growing and changing.
Hmm. So, just for the sake of time, and we may
Sure,
have to go for another one, um, we get to entropy.
sure.
So, what about entropy? What do you mean by entropy?
Entropy is the fact that I'm going to have to use the technical term to start with here, right?
Okay, okay.
In a closed system, everything becomes more chaotic. That order decreases in an enclosed system. But we look at the earth and we say, oh, but things grow here. We are made up of very complex molecules. Doesn't that go against the law of entropy? And the key word is a closed system. So a lot of the order that we have on Earth comes from the sun, which by the way, is running down. We've got about, I guess, about another 5.5 billion years to go before the sun goes away. So the reduction of entropy on Earth is paid for by an increase of entropy on the sun. So let's link back to what we were just talking about. If I'm feeling that there's too much pain that's headed my way because things are becoming disordered and things are not going to go the way that I like, I've got to open up the box and send some of that entropy somewhere else. Send the pain to other people and reduce my pain. Because the sum total of the entropy has to decrease. But in the end, anything will run down. The universe will run down. And being okay with that is not a human characteristic. We sometimes forego the most important connections in our life, the most important gambles we should take for the fear that it won't last. If we became comfortable with the idea that things don't last, we'd be able to enjoy the present moment so much more.
Okay, well, you've just kicked in my philosopher a little bit here. So I'm going to take what you've
Sure.
just said and just spin it a little bit. And
Go
that
right
is,
ahead.
it's not actually a spin, it's another way of looking at things. It's not that things run down, things are in a constant state of change.
Yes.
So that, water can become air, and the sunlight becomes, grass, and it all is constantly moving. So even if the sun goes away in 5 billion years, it's in a state of transformation.
Yes.
It's not really that it goes away, it's that something else comes into its place. It's the butterfly concept in another way. So I just want to be careful. Everything doesn't end badly. It ends and goes perhaps to another form.
To another form, but here I have to turn to my scientific side, not my philosophical side, my scientific side.
Okay.
The sum total of the energy in all the forms that are successor forms will be less than the sum total of energy was before. We are running down. And again, the brain will fight against that because we don't like that concept. But it's okay. It's okay.
Well, we'll have to pick up on a whole conversation about that.
I'd love to.
And I appreciate that. So again, now let's bring this back to the final one, which is
Subjectivity.
subjectivity.
Yes. This is one we really don't like. We like to believe there is one right answer, and coincidentally enough, we have it.
I just demonstrated that, yes.
No, no, you did not. What you demonstrated was the exact opposite in my heart and in my eyes, Phyllis. What you just demonstrated is the opposite. I'll tell you what the opposite of objectivity is. It's the old saw about the 10 blind people feeling an elephant. And one's holding the tail and says, an elephant is like a rope, and insists on it. The other one's holding the tusk. The elephant is like the spear, and holds. This is such a trap for human beings that even the most brilliant mind of all of our times, Albert Einstein, couldn't get his mind around it. He rejected quantum physics. He didn't say quantum physics was wrong because it met all the experiments we threw at it, but that it was incomplete. There's got to be a right answer, a certain answer somewhere. We just haven't found it yet. And then a lot of very good scientists proved that no, it's not incomplete. It is the way it is. And so the opposite of objectivity is the 10 blind people accepting that Niels Bohr, the one of the founders of quantum physics and perhaps its greatest figure, once wrote to his son, there are two classes of falsehoods. There are two classes of truths. There are trivial truths and there are truly deep truths. And the opposite of a trivial truth is a lie. But the opposite of a truly deep truth is often another truly deep truth. The understanding that somebody who sees it differently than us is not seeing it incorrectly or dangerously, is seeing another part of this elephant that's the universe.
Oh, that's an extraordinary explanation. So I interrupted your subjective
No,
discussion.
no,
What
you
else do
made
you
it
want to
happen.
say? Okay, good.
It's
So
that
cues.
the only thing that I'd say about subjectivity is if you want to be a person of peace, um, avoid people who are right. What my greatest nightmare is people who are right. Um, the real glory of science, for example, is that all of it is conditional. What has science proven? It's proven nothing. All science can say is it hasn't been disproven yet. It might still be disproven, but it hasn't. When all of your rightness is conditional, this is the best answer we have at this time, I can agree with that. But when you say it is the right answer, and when you say it is the best right answer for this subset of people or for me or whatever, but not necessarily the best right answer for everybody, then I can't, then I can agree with that. But when you say this is how it is for all time, all circumstances, all people, then you lose me.
Well, I am so glad I haven't lost you. And I know that a question that I want to just take it down back to the human element.
Yes.
So take me through this moment in your life.
Mm-hmm.
When you wake up in the morning and you look at the sun or you look outside, how do you embrace the day? What's your ideal mindset that you embrace?
You know, I used to do a lot of public speaking, as you know. And um, what I most heard from people as I mixed with the audience before I went up to speak was something that you came close to mentioning at the beginning of this conversation, which is, I can't wait to hear what you have to say tonight. And my response invariably was, I can't either. You had to embrace the uncertainty of the day. This will not be a peak experience merely repeated. The day is rife with possibility. That's how I try to approach the day.